afternoon, folks. Thanks for attending. It's an intimate surrounding today. Just maybe following on in terms of Jim and Frank earlier on, what struck me is I am last in this schedule, and a lot of what I was hoping to cover the guys have reinforced already, so I'll move through this at some pace. And encouraging for me, there's a lot of commonality between us in terms of your advice to SMEs and the approach. But it's also good for me just to see the wider piece in terms of the way you're advising SMEs, in terms of the wider piece in terms of finance into the banking space. Just moving on then in terms of just our own perspective. So look, just a quick potted history on the Ulster Bank side, 180 years in Ireland. The last 10 years have definitely been more turbulent than we would have expected for ourselves and for our customers. We feel we've dealt with that and as best we can assist our customers to recover from it, and we're very focused now on growing our business in a sustainable way and supporting Irish SMEs, and in particular supporting SMEs in the food and drink sector where we have a strong pedigree. With capacities will end, we do want to grow our balance sheet. All the banks in Ireland, the challenge we have is that our loan books are shrinking, so we do want to lend to companies and grow our business and help and support your business. And we know, risk appetite wise, we know the kind of business we want to do. So Frank was very clear around the kind of the 3 times cash flow end. For food and drink it can go a little bit higher because typically some businesses are more stable. And our ambition is to be number 1 for service, trust and advocacy, and we're well on the way for that, we believe, in terms of just our commitment to the market. In terms of additional, the next page there, Jim. That's great. In terms of just practical supports for Irish SMEs, so in terms of Small Business Can's a website that offers networking and advice to Irish SMEs. Businesswomen Can is a networking forum for Irish businesswomen. We have a 20-year history with the Business Achievers Awards, celebrating the best in Irish business and SMEs in particular. And I suppose most importantly for businesses here looking to borrow, we are a partner of the SBCI, the Strategic Banking Corporation. We offer the largest discount of the 3 main banks. We offer 1% discount on loans for SMEs, providing lower cost, longer term funding. And that can equate to about a 25% saving in your interest bill when you're borrowing, so it is very significant. In terms of the next slide there then, for food and drink SMEs in particular, we have focused very closely on this sector in recent years and some very tailored offerings. So flexible repayments, we recognise the seasonality in your business as to when you are achieving sales, when you're investing in stock and production. Owned premises, we are providing significant finance for food and drink companies to actually buy the premises they're operating from. In a number of cases, people are renting their premises and need to expand or want to buy it from the landlord. We also provide funding for people who want to undertake market research. And obviously the strength of your existing business is critical there, but you might not realise that actually it's possible to borrow to do market research and to do new product development. Invoice finance and trade finance are common tools that help international trade and help food and drink companies particularly to fund growth in sales through invoice finance. Lombard, which is our leasing business for plant and machinery, trucks, etc., and production equipment. In capital markets, we heard from the speaker from AIB there in terms of the importance of hedging, so we're very active in that space as well. And finally, deposits, you'll get less from these days just given how low rates are, but we do have offerings there in terms of seasonality, in terms of to invest your surplus cash. I think the key reasons for seeking funding and align very much to what Frank was saying, so I'll go through them at pace. Growth and acquisitions is the future. It wasn't 3 to 4 years ago, it is now, and it's a combination of things. Some people are willing to sell their business they weren't willing 3 to 4 years ago because performance wasn't good. And people in businesses that have the capacity to buy something, actually, they may have had the capacity 2 to 3 years ago, but they didn't have the confidence, and now they do. So that is an important dimension. Expansions, people in the food and drink sector in particular, we have noticed, they are winning more contracts. They are winning more business abroad from companies they're dealing with in Ireland. So, we have some situations where people supply Starbucks, the next thing they get asked to supply shops in the UK or shops in Europe, and they have to invest to cope with that. Succession planning, I mentioned at the start, there's a lot of people that actually want to retire 4 or 5 years ago and couldn't. And now that the economy is stronger and their business is doing better, they want to retire. So it's an opportunity there for the next generation of management to do an MBO or for a competitor to buy the business. But we see a lot of activity at the moment where management teams are acquiring a stake, maybe a small stake to start with, but acquiring a stake in the business. And then finally refinancing and restructuring. Very active at the moment in terms of people whose loans were sold by exiting banks and they are now wanting to, maybe they've been happy to sit tight for a period of time in terms of not refinancing, but now as they want to invest in the business, they do need to refinance and they need to borrow additional money for their business. In terms of 5 tips for seeking funding, this would very much pick up on the themes that Frank and Jim spoke to earlier on in terms of the wider innovation funding, the grant piece, and just the wider spectrum of finance. I've looked at this from an SME perspective in terms as an SME, one of the key pieces that we look at when we're assessing a loan application. And the first thing I'll say is, there is a significant obligation on us as a bank to give every loan application due consideration. And that's under the SME regulations that were introduced by the government central bank in the middle of this year. So we have to scrutinise every case appropriately, and if there's an opportunity to lend money there and support that company, we're obliged to do it. If we don't do that, we decline. The borrower has a right to appeal, and if we can't support them, we were very clear and say we can't support you, but you can appeal. And sometimes cases get appealed, they go through the credit review office, of which we're a voluntary member, and with the revised shape to the deal, we can actually support the company. So we're very open to that. We don't mind being challenged. We try and be disciplined in our risk taking, but we do recognise that sometimes, as the thing evolves, an SME can present the case in a different way, and it's supported. We spoke of the business plan. For us, that's the most important investment you'll ever make. Understanding your business, being able to tell your story. When you come into a bank who doesn't know anything about your business, or maybe even your sector perhaps, that won't be the case with food and drink, but really important to be able to tell your story really well. Jim, I think you mentioned passion earlier on, and I just emphasise that in terms of writing your business plan. Really bringing home why you believe in the business, why you believe in the product. That can often be the difference between something being approved or not. So really important in terms of that, and a good detailed business plan. We recommend people take advice, so we recommend the likes of Frank and his business to people that it's a really important document. It brings clarity to your thinking and brings clarity to your funding needs. Financial projections is next. The figures need to stand up to scrutiny. And Jim, I think you mentioned, salesperson's projections versus the financial accountant's projections, and the sweet spot's really between the two. But for us, that's a critical document, and really understanding, how do the numbers work. We'll go through your sales. Are you trying to take market share? Are you entering a new market? Are you developing new products? Is it just to have an existing product that people want to buy more of? So with food and drink, we sometimes see situations where the retailers are saying, if you can produce more, I will buy more. And that is a really compelling business case for us to support. What are your assumptions around gross margins? Sometimes people make assumptions that they'll improve their gross margins by improving their production, but they don't realise that actually you need to be at full production to get the best gross margin, and if you're only building up to that, actually you won't achieve the profit you expected to. And it's to understand that. And as the SME owner and person looking for the finance, we expect you to be intimate with your numbers, to really understand them, and to know exactly the actions that you take and how they affect your profitability, and not to be surprised by them instead. Sensitivity analysis. For us, that's where are you vulnerable? Is it sales? Is it your gross margin? Is it your costs? Is it a competitor? Is it one big customer? What is the sensitivity analysis? The 2 or 3 kind of downsides you need to run to say, how would I cope if that happened? That could be something as simple as assuming a slower build-up of product sales, or maybe a bad season in your business. What would you do? Would you run out of cash? It may give you answers you don't like, but you're better get those now than when it's too late. Understanding your cash flow cycle. When are the months where your cash is lean? So if you talk to me in the beer trade as a craft brewer, no beer sells in January. The most beer sells in November, December. We've seen situations where people didn't really understand that, couldn't understand in January then when their bank account was heavily overdrawn, and it was their first time dealing with it and realising actually God, we hadn't really factored that in. What's your seasonality? If you're in the confectionery trade, is it Easter? Is it Mother's Day? Are you paying wages and raw materials and waiting 6 weeks or 8 weeks to get paid afterwards? You need to fund that, and you need to understand it really well. And then know what you're looking to fund. And so my colleagues are here from the leasing side, and invoice finance part of our business as well. Is it working capital? Sometimes the easiest thing to fund is sales, which may sound like a strange thing to say, but if you're dealing with really good retailers or multiples, our ability to do invoice discounting on that is probably your most ready, flexible and scalable source of finance, and the one where risk-wise we've got the best chance of supporting you. And it's the best way to get finance for growth is through invoice discounting, and that's just something that people sometimes have a hang-up on it. People of an older vintage have a hang-up on it in terms of regarding this factoring, but it's not. And frankly, probably be familiar with that with the SMEs you deal with, that actually it is a very good source of finance, but takes some persuasion sometimes to get people to use it. What I thought would be useful then, Jim, on the next one is just talking through some specific examples in terms of, as a business owners, is there situations here that are similar to what you're dealing with? So the first one is expansion. These are examples of cases where we've supported Irish SMEs and food and drink SMEs in the last 6 months in terms of their business needs. So the first one is a company that had really strong growth during the recession, had made an acquisition of a complementary business, had a really, really strong brand, and had won a lot of contracts with retailers, coffee chains, etc. But the problem was it was running 3 shifts and actually did not physically have enough space. And as we visited that premises, we had to squeeze against the wall as production workers went by with trays of goods. So completely inefficient. Their operating margins were around 6% when it should have been 10%, and they knew themselves that it was an efficiency thing in terms of premiums and overtime, etc. They wanted to buy a new premises, and they needed working capital funding to support sales growth as well. So for us, we were able to justify giving them the term funding. So we did look at the value of the building they were buying, but we were very much focused on actually the cash flow in terms of the ability to repay. Security is good, but security doesn't repay alone, cash flow repays alone. So for us, it was critical to understand actually the projections. And what was key for us in this transaction and supporting this client was it was actually about getting the right cost base right. For the level of production they were doing, having the right level of gross margin, the right level of staffing costs, and the right level of operating costs to get a 10% operating margin like we expected they should have had. And we didn't bank the full amount to it. At an 8% operating margin, that company had sufficient cash flow to repay its borrowings. We did an invoice discounting facility as well to support growth in the UK in terms of the contracts they've won over there. So very much a case of, the historical profits wouldn't have supported the borrowing, but looking at the projections, it was possible to do that. The second case, Jim, there is refinance and funding UK expansion. And this is a not uncommon situation. There's a number of companies out there who have borrowings that may have been with Bank of Scotland or Danske and are in a loan fund. And typically they're at low margins and they're not really incentivised to refinance them because the borrowing rate is cheap. But as a result, they can't really borrow more money because their security is all tied up with that loan fund. So when they come with a business opportunity, they then do need to refinance and borrow with a new bank. And that was this situation. At the same time, they also wanted to get BRC accreditation for their product. So what we provided was a term loan here to refinance the existing bank in full, or the loan fund in full, and provide the capex for the BRC accreditation. We also provided them with an invoice discounting facility to support the UK sales. And basically, the Irish business as it was, in terms of its track record, 35-year track record, and a really good management team, allowed the Irish business alone was able to repay the borrowings and the capex needed. So a good example of a situation, and Frank, you'll probably see this, Jim, possibly as well, where people are kind of sitting tight in terms of rather than refinancing and are holding back their businesses as a result. And then the final example I just gave is funding production scale-up. This was a much more challenging one. So this company was making 100,000 of profit, looking to borrow 800,000. So a very, very stretching ask. As a result, given that risk profile, it had an equity investor coming in. For us, that was a significant comfort. The equity investor was a credible person. They knew the sector well, and for them, though, they wanted to know that there was banking facilities in place and that those facilities were appropriate. They didn't want to put their money in and find that they had a cash flow crisis then 3 months later or 4 months later. For us, the key thing was we knew the sector quite well. We backed a number of companies in it, and we knew what good looked like, and we knew what bad looked like. We had a bit of both in our existing portfolio. So we were able to assess this management team and see that they had the right skills they needed, and their approach to growing the business was exactly what it should be in terms of securing the contracts. In this case, they had letters of intent and very clear messages from retailers that they would take additional product from them, or they would list the product for the first time. So this company's problem was it could not produce enough to meet the actual demand for its product. That was a good branded product. Given the kind of risk involved in terms of 8 times cash flow lending, we did get independent due diligence, and that was to make sure there was nothing lurking there, that we were taking enough risk in terms of buying into the business plan and the growth. We didn't want to find in 3 or 6 months' time that actually there was a mistake in the financials or there was a tax problem or something. So that's relatively uncommon to get due diligence in a deal for an SME, but in this case, ourselves and the equity investor felt it was the right thing to do, and it came out completely sound. I mentioned sensitivity analysis earlier on in terms of the funding approach. we did sensitivity analysis here, and we looked at that, and it showed us that the business could sustain underperformance, still have enough cash to trade through, and that was down to the equity buffer that was in the business. So we didn't need the full projections to be achieved. This business could underperform versus their plan and still do sufficiently well to repay the borrowings. And they got a full package from us, term debt, foreign exchange, invoice discounting, and they are doing very well, and hopefully will continue to do well. So my core message to you is we're open for business. We do want to support Irish SMEs and Irish food and drink SMEs in particular. We have a lot of expertise in the area. A number of my colleagues are here today at the stand, and please do talk to us. Thank you.
Just one question there on your last slide. What do you mean by retailer's clear message? Is that a 5-year contract or an intention to list, or that's a fairly dubious term?
It's a very good question. In that case, it was a very significant senior person in a retail chain directly assuring that they wanted this product. So it was stronger than normal. But it's a very good question, Jim, and it is that fine balance between aspirational letters of intent and actual firm contracts. And what can you bank or not? That is a real challenge in a situation like that. So. Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I have this as the third one, which is the most difficult one to fund, but exactly. Any other questions there yet? Thanks.
You just, last slide as well, just out of interest, you said the due diligence on underperformance, that you're still happy with the risk on underperformance. Do you remember what your percentage of underperformance was? Or just even ballpark?
Much about 20%, 20-25% underperformance in terms of the new contract wins, but also later slower build-up. Yeah, so it's as much, and that for us that's actually, sometimes people are right about how much they'll do, but just way too ambitious in terms of how quickly it'll come through. And you can take 6 or 12 months, and it's literally the carrying cost of, so you've ramped up your cost of production, you have your production staff lined up, you have your premises rented, you have your equipment invested in, but you're actually not putting enough production through it. So that was the challenge, and that's why that business did need the equity buffer. And the equity guys in that case wanted the debt buffer, so there was mutual reliance.
Was your stress test 80% of their sales forecast? That's what I was asking.
Yeah, well, it would have been. Yes, yeah, and actually even 75%. And then it's stress on the existing business as well, it's stress on the existing sales as well, and to a lesser extent. It's very much case by case, and it's talking to a management team. Us trying to do a sensitivity in isolation is kind of silly, so it's talking to the management team to actually say, look, what do you think is the credible one or not? So that's what the approach would be.